Welcome to the Geometry Creative Week program, and welcome to a session all about one very inspiring case study. My name is Hohmann. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of Geometry in the EMEA region, and with me here today is my dear old friend, a great creative leader, has founded agencies, has worked at great agencies, now is the Chief Creative Officer since a few weeks, I believe, of BBH in New York, Rafael Rizuto. Welcome.
Hi guys, happy to be here.
You know, you really made your way in this wonderful industry. So you're a man of many awards, many great cases, many iconic cases. And that's the reason why, I connected and said, hey, Rafa, can you join us? Can you talk about one of your iconic cases? So as Geometry in Creative Week, we're talking about iconic work. And what we mean with that type of work is work that has really moved the audience, the intended audience, has shifted the needle, has had cultural impact, has really done something beyond just hitting a brief, but really infected media and has become something that people know. So that's the type of work, of course, that we want to do, we strive to do as Creative Commerce Agency. We want to do iconic work. But one of the things that we feel is interesting, and I feel is interesting, and we want to talk about today is, having the idea is one thing, but actually making it happen is quite another. So who better to talk with about making real matters? That's the title of this session than yourself. So I think one of the things we said in the beginning, because there's so many cases we could choose from that you've done, let's hone in on a case and really take that apart a little bit. Move beyond the obvious and really try and understand what it took to make it real. And there is a case which is bizarrely, I think it's 4 years, 3 years?
3 years ago, 2017. Yeah.
So it's, you could say in our industry, 3 years is actually quite old, but bizarrely it's more current than ever because it actually is about a topic that, is part of why there is such anxiety right now. It really pinpoints part of the problem related around diversity, Black Lives Matter, systemic issues. And this is the case for Boost Mobile, Boost Your Voice. A great case, great iconic case. And in saying that, technically, we could just start talking because it's iconic, everybody probably knows it. But I think it's a good way to start into this by just showing the case study.
There are complaints about the fewer number of polling places.
The racially and economically oriented placement of polling sites is disgraceful.
I spent 9 hours in a gym packed full of hundreds and hundreds of people.
We're the only advanced democracy in the world that systematically put up barriers and make it as hard as possible for our citizens to vote.
Low-income and minority voters face longer lines and have fewer places to vote. Boost Mobile stores are located in these communities. So we did the unprecedented. We turned Boost stores into voting stations. To make this possible, we had to work within the same system that was suppressing votes. We called 817 counties to find officials willing to stand up against inequality. And on November 8th, people voted at Boost stores across the country.
So our storefront has been open since 6 a.m. this morning, and voters have been floating in and out.
This wasn't just an election-themed ad campaign. We were actually inside the election process. And beyond our stores, we advocated for the unheard, shining a light on unequal voting access with voting rights groups and election officials, and partnering with top hip-hop artists to inspire people to get out and vote.
To make sure that we're safe, to make sure that we get out there and get our votes out.
Everybody has a voice. Just let it be heard.
Wow. So that really is a case, it just touches so many elements. Of course, you could kind of look at it and go, it's purpose, but it's also for brand. And then from our perspective, it's interesting because it's all about retail as well. So there's many layers to this. Now, one of the things I think, let's start with that maybe. One of the things I think is interesting. We tend to look at these cases and go, oh, you know, that was easy. Or I don't even know how they made that. So it's those two. Or even more, I think, you know, within agencies, you tend to have this reaction, oh, I had that idea.
Yeah.
You kind of go, yeah, great, but you didn't make it. So in a way, you look at this case and you think, well, there's an idea clearly that was, you know, how did you come up with the idea? Let's talk about the idea. Having the idea, you know, how did you come up with that, and how did you think when you discovered that idea? Why did you think it would be relevant to Boost Mobile?
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I might be I've been working at BBH for about 2 months, and I'm already indoctrinated, right? So Sir John Haggerty, he says that ideas are 80% inspiration, 80% transpiration, right? So I would say this idea would say like 20% inspiration, 500% transpiration, right? So, and it comes back to a motto that I have, which is an idea never give up on you, you give up on them, right? So I think the merit of this idea was this amazing team never giving up on this idea, because to your point, just to give you like a little context. So we were when the idea was generated, was back in 2016, like the election, the infamous election here in the US where Trump won, right? And I remember, so we had that account, Boost Mobile. It used to be like a bigger account for us, right? But like many brands, the trend right now, they were bringing work in-house. So like most of the bulk of the work, they brought in-house, but they kept with us the social management part of it, right? Which I think in some agencies, they don't give it the right attention to it, which I think is where you can really connect to culture, and you can be fast, and you can be more, you don't have to overthink, you know, the things happening so real time. And I remember was that back in the time when Trump, he did an infamous rally where he called Mexicans and they were rapists, they were this, they were that. And we had a brief from the client, which is a social post to do something relevant to the campaign, right? And for people who doesn't know, Boost Mobile is an arm of Sprint, which is a big telecom, and Boost Mobile it's for low income people, right? So they sell mostly like prepaid phones and everything. So, and I remember like was this the contextual landscape was all about Trump saying all those things and everything. So, and the social media manager of that account happened to be like a woman called Carla. So she was originally by Mexico, right? That's another so this case touching so many points. One of them is diversity. So to have a diverse cast of people, you can come with more interesting, diverse ideas, right? So then the team, there was a discussion about what we can do. That's more than a post, right? And the team, this amazing team, he came out to me and said, what if we turn, if you look at Boost Mobile stores, they are everywhere in these neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods. And one thing that me being foreign from Brazil, and I always look at the US as the example of democracy, right? So like they are the ones, the founding fathers, they created, they actually, they go to all the clouds to impose democracy, like they call it. So, but the concept of vote suppression for me was completely a foreign concept. You know, they have no idea that in the most quote unquote democratic country in the world, a lot of people they make impossible for people to vote, right? So, and I got exposed to that concept of vote suppression, and then the team came back to that very simple idea, right? It's one of those ideas that you don't even write down or make a board. It's just like, what if we turn like Boost stores into polling places? They are everywhere in this neighborhood. And I think when we saw that, I just thought, oh, that's something really interesting. Let's find out, right? So we did a quick research, like a desktop research, and we found that you actually can. Why nobody's doing that? So then the whole thing, the journey started, right? So having that idea was so quote unquote easy, but you have to be connected culturally, right? But like make it happen. This idea died so many times because this is one of the reasons that I started an agency, right? Because we were tackling that idea as a traditional agency. So we had an EP, an executive producer to go after, but this is something that you cannot produce. It's not an ad, right? So how can you, so we try and test like different things, and the idea died many times because the counties, we're supposed to call the counties, they were just saying no.
So actually, sticking to that first thought though, it's kind of, the idea was somewhat easy, I think. Right? Yeah. Once you did a bit of research, of course there's a spark, and of course I'm not belittling the idea, but with the social media manager on client side, also having her family history probably was somewhat of an easy sell, right?
100%.
So, but then you ran into, I understand, you ran into real issues. You started to work, and it was a lot of work. And I think one of the great things about this case is there's also a documentary, and you made a documentary. So maybe we watch a few minutes that really focus on how, from having that idea and having it sold, to your point, the many many hurdles, just some of the hurdles you really ran into.
We really had to figure out and really get inside the process of how we vote and how each county decides what can be a polling station.
Is it a very easy, smooth system throughout the nation? No. No.
One thing that most people don't understand is that the elections are controlled at a county level, not at a state or a federal level. So each county has different jurisdiction over the rules and regulations for how voting happens in that county. We reached out to every county in the United States with a booth store, which turned out to be 817 counties in 48 states. We had a team of over 30 people for about 7 months working on this.
Once the team had overcome the logistics of calling hundreds of counties, they soon faced another, even bigger obstacle: the election officials themselves.
We thought that a lot of counties would appreciate the offer, but we were surprised to find that we actually had a lot of resistance. So many counties told us they already have enough polling locations, even if they had long lines in the past.
From the different responses, the one that was the most, difficult to understand was when the county said, we have enough. And we would ask then, do you anticipate there's going to be long lines again? And they would say, well, we have enough. So we really didn't get past that question. And then when we would ask a little further, well, is there anything else we can do? There won't be any long lines. Basically, they were not interested in going further.
The team began wondering why they were facing so much resistance from certain counties. Why wouldn't officials want to make voting as easy as possible? They reached out to experts for answers.
Making it difficult to vote at every stage of the process has been a strategy to suppress part of the electorate.
There is a game that is played where the polling places are manipulated in order to suppress voter access.
And what they're really doing is they're suppressing the vote, not preventing fraud and making more accurate elections.
It's clear that they are reducing the participation, in particular of racial and ethnic minorities. We have a polling process that makes it difficult for many voters, so limited number of polls, limited polling hours.
Well, generally, when they suppress the vote, they're successful at suppressing the vote of the poorest economic echelons in society. And so it takes the voice away from those people. So the rich are able to give money to influence the political process, and they get to vote more easily than everybody else. And so it's truly unfair.
All right, so that's astounding, and even in the current climate, in the current circumstances, this is 3 years ago, and today everybody's realizing, it is really a systemic problem. Everybody's starting to talk about how it's a systemic problem. Clearly, even 3 years ago, it was a systemic problem. You ran into it, you uncovered it, and your team actually couldn't get through this wall, right? So this is, I guess, one of the points you mentioned earlier, where normally as an agency, you might give up, but then if that had happened, we wouldn't be talking about the case. So what did what did you do? How did you proceed when running into those moments?
Now, that's what was very interesting is that I have a very strong view in purpose marketing, right? I think there's a confusion in our industry right now about purpose and cause marketing. For me, purpose is the reason the brand exists, and cause market is one of its expressions, right? And I think there's a lot of brands out there trying to do cause marketing, mixing it up with purpose. And if you look at Boost, their purpose, they literally give people a voice, right? So, and we found that, I'll talk a little bit how we presented to the client, which is they bought the idea immediately, right? Because it was so bulletproof. So like you guys literally give this audience, which is a lower income audience, like a voice, like through like mobile phones and everything. So what if we give them a voice to vote, to exercise that right to speak, right? And that was the client was with us since the beginning, which is very rare for an idea like that, right? So, and as I was mentioning before, so we were hitting a lot of walls because we didn't have that politics world expertise, right? So the idea died a few times until we had this idea, what if we brought into this idea someone from inside the politics, right? So someone know a guy who worked at the Bernie Sanders campaign. So the guy was, lack of better word, he was a lobbyist, right? So like he knew everybody in those counties. So like the moment we brought that guy in, so we stopped facing this, trying to bring this idea to life through a lenses of an agency, and really, that's what I call, that's the kind of diversity that I like a lot. A lot of people like diversity for the optics, but I think it gets interesting with diversity of backgrounds, right? So we brought this guy in, and then the whole thing unlocked. So like the counties started like answering us, and it was a snowball, one after the other. So that was very enlightening to me, that how we get out of our bubble and really embrace different expertise. And that's what made this idea be so successful.
So essentially, you didn't give up, and you found different ways of selling it in, which is one of the topics we're also discussing. You don't really sell an idea once. You keep selling it. You keep selling more elements of it. And you have to, if you really want to make it, you really need to never give up. And I think, yet again, a little short snippet from your wonderful documentary, which talks to that, which actually talks to how you never gave up.
Yeah. Persistence was everything. I mean, everybody was dedicated to the project. And I mean, that's what it took.
After hundreds of phone calls and months of work, they managed to find several election officials willing to stand up against inequality and willing to take on the risk of trying something completely new.
So I serve as the chairman right now of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission Board of Advisors, and that's the federal body, the actual commission that oversees certification of voting systems. The beautiful thing about retail is parking, ADA accessible stores, a location that is already established and the public, and there's foot traffic. Those are all very positive things. So I would really question anybody that's not getting involved in this, because it just makes sense.
That's amazing. So persistence does pay off, and having the right contacts pays off, and actually never giving up pays off. So that's what we learn here. And you said earlier, so there was this tipping point where suddenly things started to shift, and more counties got on board, and suddenly it became more realistic that this might actually happen. And I think one of the things when we go back into the original case study that's super interesting is you also had Chance the Rapper on board. You had street marches. So suddenly, the idea, okay, we're going to have polling stations in shops became a cultural topic. So how did that happen? How did that kind of unfold?
It's so interesting because it's a testament of the power of an idea, right? So this wasn't an idea that we had a lot of media money and everything. It was completely grassroots. So like the way we start engaging, not just a Chance with a bigger name, and he was doing a concert in Chicago, which was on one of the cities that really embraced this project, right? Was all about connections from grassroots movement, about voting and vote suppression. So the moment we tap into that world, right? So things start bubbling up. Like one person who knows another person who knows another person who knows someone in the county who knows that Chance would be doing a concert, and that person knew that he was engaged into vote and politics. So like that was how it happened. It was completely, it's almost you lit the fire and then it started. You know, it was beyond our control, right? So it was just it was this roots movement. You know, it literally, it wasn't something that of course we were seeing the opportunities and we were tapping into them, but some of the stuff it just happened, you know, because of that little idea that was so right, and it was so interesting about how it wasn't just like a one-off thing. If you look at the thing, is even in the case, Boost Mobile was part of the voting process. It's in like places to vote, Boost Mobile stores. So like it wasn't like unique.
There's a great last scene I'm going to show from the documentary about that, because I think it's like in the documentary, it really touched me to see what happened. So the Boots mobile stores really converted into a very official place. So maybe we quickly watch that little piece.
We actually became, for that day, a part of the voting experience in America. Our brick and mortar structure no longer belonged to Boost Mobile. It no longer belonged to the store owner, but at that day, for one day, belonged to the American people.
We could just leave it at that and kind of say, oh, you made it happen. The purpose topic, giving people a voice.
Yep.
Which is, in this case, you know, don't get me wrong, is amazing. But then, of course, we are also agencies. We are here with commercial intent. We are an agency that's about creative commerce. And I think what's really interesting is that this case also had commercial impact, which kind of, it kind of almost feels wrong to talk about it, but it is interesting. Because after all, you could also argue, okay, so for one day, all of these stores were converted, so obviously the brand was losing, income, et cetera, et cetera. But it actually did boost the impact. And I think there's an Effie case. I probably also won that. So there's a few charts from the Effie case. Maybe if you want to talk to the results.
So like, what was interesting about the client was key for this whole thing, you know. Since the beginning, we thought, let's make this a pure thing. Let's not create a voting 50% off promotion. Or let's do this in a very meaningful way, you know, like, because I think the audience more than ever, they can smell if the brand is trying to take advantage and everything. So let's do this in its purest form, right? So you have a location, let's give them a vote. So and the clients, they were completely on board with that, right? Which is one of and if you look at the retail, you guys know more anyone in this world, you guys are the specialists. The holy grail of retail is having people inside the store, right? So we managed to find a way of people going to the store and create this almost like emotional connection with the brand, right? And we didn't have to hard sell anything, but because people happen to be in the store, they look at the stuff that we had, and the stores that converted to voting place, they had a 29% increase in sales, right? Which for me, if you look at the EFI submission, there's a lot of brand sentiment, about all those quantitative and qualitative results. But for me, this is one that's very pragmatic, you know, like 29% increase in sales, right? So like, it shows, for me, is one of the examples where purpose meets commerce, right? So usually brands, they play in this purpose world and for brand awareness, and this one actually have tangible results, right? Because, and even like that, there are other data that is not there that shows the commitment and the people had with this brand for the future. You know, it is something that really with this idea, we managed to create like a stronger connection between the brand and the consumers, right? So, and for me, that was what we started as, okay, let's, as you mentioned, and it's in a brand awareness way, you know, like we are a company who sells phones and data. Let's give them a voice. And if you go all the way down the funnel, so we literally sold more, right? So it was very interesting how that happened, you know. So we weren't expecting that increase of sales.
Yeah. And then, of course, I mean, you did have the actual turnout increase, which is the more, that's looking at this case from a purpose and doing good perspective is, of course, what everybody would focus on usually. And it is amazing. You did have that real boost in turnout in those counties that participated. And I think you mentioned earlier, I think that's an interesting nugget. Of course, you had more people vote. And that was your intent. You wanted to give people a voice, which I would assume when you started, because you mentioned that, right? There was a certain type of anger around the rally that had happened. So you did have a certain angle on, you wanted to get people to vote, and you kind of had a perception of how they would vote. And I think then in the end, of course, that's not true, right? It's democracy. So I think you were a bit surprised.
For me, that's the epiphany is the most interesting thing that happened the whole thing. So like, I'll be 100% blunt here. So we had, like within our little bubble, like a liberal bubble in California, we thought that we would create a movement that helped defeat Trump. I'll be 100%, right? Because of everything that he had presented, especially to the audience that we thought, right? And I remember that the campaign was highly successful. It wasn't, so the reason that we created a documentary is because we found so many things that it's not fair to put everything in a 2-minute case study, right? So we had so many interesting people involved. We decided to do this 10-minute case study, right? But then we never worked so hard. It took more than a year. So when the results came out and Trump won, everybody in the team was so depressed, right? It's almost like, a little arrogance almost, like who the fuck are we, and then like the results after that phase of anger and denial, all the phases they go through, all this idea didn't work. We tried everything. And so then the results start coming in, right? And if you look, as I said early on, the main consumers of Boost Mobile is like, especially Latin immigrants, Mexican immigrants, right? And the results start coming out, and we found that 33% of Mexican men voted for Trump. 27% of Mexican women voted for Trump. Then, like, we realized that, okay, who the hell are we to assume what people would vote for or not? That's not. We were trying to fight for democracy, and we were having a completely distorted view of democracy, which for me made the idea even better. Like, regardless of your position and your political position, we give you a voice, right? So that for me, it became a more generous and empathetic idea. Like we as a brand, we are not judging you. We are giving you a voice, right? So that for me was what really. And it's not in the case study because we didn't want to get too political, and so we wanted to focus on the idea. But for me, that was the power of this idea. We without judgments, we gave people a voice and they spoke.
Yeah,
right.
It's great. I mean, so it is one of those cases. Thank you for sharing openly all of these insights. And I would argue for many, many of the cases that that I know, that people out here now know, cases that we call iconic, there's probably stories like this.
Yeah.
They are stories of often involving persistence, not giving up. So, looking back, I kind of think making real matters is the topic of this talk. I asked you in the beginning, so, what was more important, having the idea or actually sticking to the idea, never giving up? So in closing, maybe, what is your advice to our teams? Obviously creative teams, for having the ideas, but then I think this is really also about the entire agency once, sticking to an idea. So what is your very personal, insight and guidance to everybody out here on how to make something happen?
No, that's super interesting because, as I said before, an idea never give up on you, you give up on them. But it is a fine line about believing on an idea and being stubborn, right? Because sometimes you just have to shift gears and find something better. But if you really find that's something that's really special, right? That in that case, this idea, and you feel that is a sentiment that not just yours, right? It transcends you. You know, like if you see that that idea is resonating with a lot of people, I think just go for it, right? And try different things. I think as a creative industry, sometimes we are not as creative how we approach problems. You know, we have that set of skills and the way of doing things. Go out of your bubble, right? What happened, the thing that happened with Boost mobile campaign, we could completely do a one-off campaign, try to do one story and do like a beautiful film about how we give a voice to people. But that was an idea that was worth a fight for. And as I said, get out of your bubble and bring other expertise into the fold. Don't think that you alone and the capability you are in the agency will be able to solve everything, right? So look outside and see what are other ways you can bring that idea to life. That's because I genuinely think that if I look back, the best work I ever done in my career, the more people, talented people who touch it and made it better, right? So be the one responsible to light the fire, but embrace more people. You know, the more the fire catch, the better for the idea. So that would be my advice.
Great. So here's to collaboration, to making ideas happen. And in closing, I can only say thank you. Thank you for sharing very openly the story of this great iconic case, a case that feels more current than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's also to seeing more great work from you, but of course also from us.
Thanks for having me, guys.